When it comes to manga, there are many different categories depending on where you look. But over time, only two categories have begun to take over the space, and these two categories are shonen and seinen. The genre shonen is targeted for the younger male audience, predominantly middle school to high school. You are definitely familiar with popular shonen such as Naruto, Dragon Ball, or One Piece, as each of these series are meant to have exciting attacks and explosions to keep the younger audience entertained, which is why you see a lot of shonen manga filled with predominantly action. Now, this isn't to say that shonen don't also have good storylines, because they do. I've been a fan of shonen series since I was younger, and I enjoyed a lot of stories like Naruto and Dragon Ball, not only for their action, but also for their story. Now, seinen manga are targeted for the adult male audience. The tones are more mature and the storyline is much deeper than your average shonen. You see, seinen manga are meant to not only be entertaining, but teach you something about life at the same time. You might also read a seinen manga where you find the main character going through a hard time and you end up relating yourself to the character. Now, keep in mind, even though seinen is a category, every seinen manga is different. And just because people talk about seinen as some ultra mature category, there is still a lot of laid back and comedic moments as well. Enough of talking about what seinen is, let me give you an example. You have probably heard of Vagabond. It's a story about a 17-year-old swordsman named Takizo who's filled with anger and he is hated in his own village. He wanders around looking for some solutions to his problems, anything to ease his anger. He comes across an old man who begins to teach him, and you see, although Takizo didn't know it at this point in time, over time he learns that in order to become stronger, he must also become kinder. Takizo ends up changing his name to Miyoto Musashi, which is what most people who have ever heard of Vagabond know him by. By dealing with an internal battle of rage and understanding while facing strong opponents as he goes throughout life, Musashi eventually becomes much calmer, much more loving, but also much more deadly. Musashi is 21 by the current stage of the manga, and over the last 4 years of his life, we get to see him face intense internal challenges and external opponents. I can't even begin to get into everything that's great about Vagabond, but I will say this. The art is amazing, the story is amazing, the character progression of Masashi Miyamoto is amazing. For anyone, or maybe even you, who feels angry in their lives but wants to truly become a stronger person, Vagabond is definitely the manga for you. There are different life stories you can get from different seinen manga. For example, I'll tell you about another great series known as The Climber. Have you ever heard the quote, "Pray that your loneliness may spur you into finding something to live for, great enough to die for"? This quote fits The Climber perfectly. Anybody that feels alone in their life should seriously read The Climber. It's about a high school student named Mori Buntaru who keeps to himself and he doesn't really talk to anybody that much. Nobody can get anything out of him, and he doesn't really have friends. But one day at school, he skips class and another student forces him to climb up the school building. Mori is pushing himself to the limit, trying to make it up the outside of the building, and once he makes the final leap and makes it to the top, he feels something that he's never felt before. The teacher, who also happens to be a rock climbing instructor, comes to the roof to scold Mori for climbing up the school building because, well, obviously it's dangerous. But one good thing is that the teacher asks Mori if climbing the school made him feel good, and he points to a small mountain in the distance and says, "Over there, you can get closer to the sky." You see, I just told you what happens in the first chapter of the manga. If that sounds interesting to you, then you should definitely check it out. The rest of the series revolves around Mori's loneliness and how he only feels truly happy when he's climbing. Everybody has things that makes them happy. For Mori, it's just simply climbing. He likes to be alone while climbing, so it is the perfect sport for him. There isn't really a team aspect. You can be by yourself, climbing a mountain, feeling excited and happy all at once. And that is what Mori's journey is all about. I don't want to spoil too much, but the art in The Climber is truly impeccable, and the manga itself is one of the best I have ever read. Although this varies from person to person, I'd say that the best times in your life to read seinen series are times in your life when you are more reserved or even dealing with something. I'm not saying that you should be closed off from people, as I actually was reading a couple of series like Monster and 20th Century Boys during times of my life while I was around people. But while I was reading manga series like Vagabond and The Climber, I was much more to myself at these points in my life, and I would say that it made the experience that much better. I also want to say that just because seinen are targeted for adult males, you should definitely enjoy them even if you are a teenager. The things you learn while reading seinen manga will be beneficial during all points in your life. Also, you can enjoy shonen and seinen at the same time. A lot of seinen manga readers make it seem like you aren't mature if you don't read seinen, but that's just not true. I've read plenty of shonen and loved them, and I've read plenty of seinen and enjoyed them as well. If I began to give a list for everything I've read, it would just simply take too long. But just for a quick example to show you my perspective on both shonen and seinen, I have read all of the big shonen names like Naruto, Dragon Ball, One Piece, Bleach, and more. And I've also read all of the big seinen names like Vagabond, Berserk, Monster, Vinland, and many more as well. And I can tell you that since I have read the shonen and seinen side of things, you're definitely going to enjoy your journey reading seinen manga. There are a lot of seinen elitists you will see out there that act like they are better than people who read shonen, but just ignore those guys. They act like just because they read more mature manga that they are better than the average person, but this just isn't true. Most people you meet who have read seinen series will actually be cool people. Getting into seinen, you might not know where to start, but I'll help you out a bit. The two series I talked about earlier, Vagabond and The Climber, are good starting points, but another manga I also think is a great starting point is Vinland Saga. Season 2 of the anime has ended recently, so more people are hearing about it. The story is great. It's about a young boy named Thorfinn who watches his father die at the hands of a man named Askeladd. Trust me, I won't say too much. You learn all of that at the beginning of the story anyways, but it revolves around Thorfinn's journey of dealing with his rage at Askeladd until something big happens and Thorfinn's anger has nowhere else to go. Thorfinn meets a couple of people who he ends up really enjoying the company of, and he begins to change into a stronger, kinder person. You have probably seen this panel where Thorfinn says he has no enemies. Yes, it has become one of the most overused manga panels recently, where people will make funny jokes about having no anger. But in all seriousness, this panel is a hard hitter. I suggest you get into Vinland Saga so you can get the full context of what leads up to this, and I guarantee you will enjoy the story. When it comes to seinen manga like Vinland, Berserk, and Vagabond, think of them as like the big three of seinen manga. They are like the Naruto, One Piece, and Bleach of seinen. After you read one of those or all of those, I suggest you get into a couple of other seinen like Monster, 20th Century Boys, The Climber, and so on just to see how you like them. Different seinen will take you on different journeys. Vinland is a maturity journey for how to deal with anger. Monster is a manga about a psychotic manipulative genius who kills people in such a way that you can never quite catch him. And The Climber is about one guy dealing with the loneliness of his life. Even though all three of these series are seinen, they all teach a different story, which is the great part about it. You have a lot of variety. If you are looking for top tier art, then I suggest you start off with either Berserk or Vagabond, as people tend to hold those two in the highest tier for manga art. But if you don't care too much about art, but instead you are fully involved into a mystery type of story, then I highly recommend you check out Monster or 20th Century Boys. Both of these series are written by Naoki Urasawa, and Urasawa has multiple other hit series that I've read as well, like Pluto and Billy Bat. If you have ever seen a list for greatest manga antagonists, I am pretty sure you have seen both Griffith and Johann Liebert somewhere in the top 5. Both of these characters are the epitome of evil. Griffith is the main antagonist of Berserk, and he leads the main character Guts down a horrible lifestyle of never-ending torture and fighting. And Johann Liebert is the main antagonist of Monster. He leads the main character Kenzo Tenma on the craziest chase you have ever seen. Johann seems uncatchable the entire series, even at times when he is right before the main character's eyes. I highly recommend you read either Berserk or Monster so you can get an idea of how good these characters are firsthand. So, I will say this, if you are thinking about reading seinen manga, I highly suggest you do it. Thank you for watching, and I would really appreciate it if you could subscribe and stick around for some more videos in the future. See you next time.